Hello, everyone, and welcome to Silver and Sensational. You know me as the I, as in Lois Mills, and I am coming to you today with a wonderful guest. And all I can say is she is a jewel. She is going to talk about moving to France. Her business is Make a Move to France. And she is an expert on all things for expats to make your move to France. Who is this gorgeous, intelligent, personable lady? Her name is Maday Miralles-Carnley. And Maday is first generation, born in Miami. And she learned at a very early age how moving abroad can improve the quality of one's life, opening doors and creating opportunities that may not have been available if we just stayed still. So, on that note, let me introduce a wonderful lady that I worked with in getting my visa, but she helped in all kinds of aspects. It is Maday. Hello, Maday. How are
Hello,
you?
Lois. It's so nice to talk to you again.
Yeah. Oh, we had the greatest time, just the best time. And she's my kind of gal, and I know she'll be your kind of gal because she's straightforward, honest, and knows her stuff. So, Madai, tell me, how did you end up living in France?
There's the long story and the short story, and then there's my version and my husband's version of this. But we had 2 daughters. We both worked in the educational system, and we had traveled abroad. We took our months off while we were because the teacher schedule, you have a lot of time off in the summer, and we traveled, and we knew that the whole world raised children and did it better. I mean, at least the way we wanted our girls to be raised. And we were fans of the French educational system at that time. And we just did it. We moved abroad. It was a lot of research. We thought, let's just do it for a year, a sabbatical year. And a year turned 11. So in that process, you meet people who are like, how'd you do it? How'd you do it? And it became a job. And so here I am.
Well, with everything a person needs to do before they make the move, as I have been through for now actually 11 months in the planning to do this. The stress level, as I've spoken about earlier in earlier episodes, has been just unbelievable. And I say this as someone who I just, I don't get so stressed out about things.
Right.
At least not things I need to do and go through a process. But with everything that needed to be done, when I looked at applying for a visa, it seemed absolutely overwhelming. Maybe if you would tell us what we need to do, and let's not even start with the visa. Let's kind of just nose around before as to if you were talking to me from the very beginning of when I said, I want to move to France, what would you say are the first things a person should do?
Well, the first thing is, how are you going to provide for yourself? So money is number one, because how you make a living or whatever your income is will delineate your visa. So first of all is, how are you going to work? Are you going to work abroad? Do you have your own business? Are you in a pension? Do you have passive income, rent houses? Are you planning to get a job in a French corporate market without trying to speak French? Possible, difficult, but possible. Uh, that's the first question you need to ask yourself. The money. How are you going to make a living? Because that will delineate visa. And then once you have that figured out, it's then budget. Whatever budget you have will delineate your where you're gonna live. You might not be able to afford Paris. You might be able to live like a king in the south of France, where I live, you know? So, budget, um, and then lifestyle kinda is intertwined to that because you could still have a great lifestyle with a small budget in France.
Yes.
It's one of the smallest monthly requirements to obtain a visa, whereas even Mexico, it's like $2,200. Well, it's, only 1,500 euros in France to qualify for a visa. So your monthly income doesn't need to be a lot. Another route is the student route. So, it's complicated but simple at the same time. Your status will make the process easier or not.
So 1,500 euros is about what, $1,650?
Something like
1,700?
that changes with I tell people $1,800 just because you don't know when it's gonna be
Exactly.
it's gonna fluctuate.
Okay. All right. So you need a minimum of $1,800 a month.
Mhm.
Okay.
And there's 2 different things. There's the American side because 'cause you're gonna ask for a visa to then convert it to residency. So, when you are in the USA, you wanna show it's like a dower, everything you've got, right? You wanna be, "I'm not going to be a burden to the French government." But then France is gonna require a specific amount, and it's actually quite modest. So, the process flips on you because obtaining the visa is kind of more of an American mentality. But then when you renew your séjour, your residency, and it's different. It's much more modest. So there's the requirements, and then there's the explanation. People, there's a timeline. We're so emotional, we're getting rid of things. We're downsizing. We are afraid, but we're sound to do this. And there's so many feelings that it's almost like right brain, left brain. It's really hard to then go ahead and switch and do the paperwork and the bureaucratic things.
Which
Sometimes
is what makes you so important because even with your help, I must have gone over that paperwork 10, 12 times. It just, you gave me a list. It was, I mean, you gave me every tool, and yet I was still crazed by all the paperwork involved. One quick question just to clarify. You said, we apply for a visa here, but then we need to reapply for residency. And is that what we do within 90 days of arrival?
right. So after you have arrived to France, you pay your it's called a timbre. So it's a tax stamp. It's 200 euros and it's an online process. It's very easy. You buy your tax stamp, you take your tax stamp number, you put in your visa number, your tax stamp number, and voila, you have a PDF and that's your residency. In the past, or in other countries like Spain and Germany, you have to apply for residency physically. So not only do you need a visa, but then you have to go and apply for residency, like in Spain. Germany, it's easier. But France, really, the process is the simplest. It's so easy. And when you're going through the process, it doesn't feel that way, but when you start researching other processes, you're like, "Yeah, France is okay."
So, as someone who's lived there for so many years, and you give me an idea of how hard the adjustment was when you first arrived.
Hmm. That's I think it has like a honeymoon period, where you eat a croissant every day and you're still losing weight because you walk everywhere. And you're just like, you're so proud of yourself. The first 3 to 4 months, you're like, I got 1 baguette and I didn't say un or une, and you get it right. You're just so proud of these small milestones. But then comes a period where you hate everything about Frank. And we're like, we do this so much better. This is just ridiculous. And I can't wait. You'll go to the bank, try to get a bank account, and you'll have a 2-hour conversation with the agent. And you're like, we could have done the bank account in the time that we just had this very long conversation. No, you have to make an appointment, wait 2 weeks, and everything is make an appointment, wait 2 weeks. And then you get frustrated because you don't have control. Yet, in that lack of control, there's this peace. Like, I did this. I'm far more capable than I think. Um, and but at the same time, there's things that you start realizing you miss. Conversations at the grocery store, wanting to compliment someone perhaps in the beginning, or if you're feeling lost, how do you ask for directions? So you can feel really detached from society. And then you realize how important it is to connect. And either that precipitates you to learn more French. And for others, they're like, I'm, I'm surviving and I'm okay with A1. People, especially in Paris, they might speak more English and you survive. And then you don't need to learn French. And so it's really a roller coaster of emotions. And it depends, their female version and male version of emotions are very different too. But the lack of control, feeling that you have no control is definitely after the honeymoon period, you feel that very deeply.
It's very interesting. I never thought of it along those lines, but I could see where, yeah, that once you get into the groove of the daily living,
Mhm.
that it could be frustrating and you really need to wanna be there to
Yeah.
put up with it. Yeah, that
But
thing, um, walk walk our people, because 'cause I've done this, but walk our people through the actual work that you do with a client.
well, that varies for um per client. Um, you know
Let's say we're talking about, because most, we're silver and sensational here, so most of us would probably not be looking for work in Paris. We may, be at least semi-retired, if not retired totally. And also, even though we have couples watching, uh, can you draw upon the experiences you've had with women who are unattached, moving there on their own without a partner? And what kind of guidance do you give this category of person?
well, I think sometimes when you're in a partnership, it's divide and conquer a lot. But when it comes to a single person, you're doing it all on your own. And it can be even more overwhelming because you can't just give someone, oh, you know, in a lot of couples, the woman is in charge of just purely, you know, um, just getting rid of objects in the home, the domestic part of it. And then the man takes care of all the paperwork, right? And so there's less of like that mental tax, that mental load of having to do everything. And so I think that I get to provide that, like the divide and conquer. When you're moving about, sometimes it's just easier to trust someone and listen to them and just do what they say instead of having to think about it. And
Absolutely.
right. And I hope I could provide that, or it's like, trust me. And there's so many details that you just don't think about it. A lot of times, single women might have a different name from their birth certificate. You need to have proof of why you've had that name change. There's so many little details that you're not going to find on forums or on groups because they don't provide that specific kind of information. And perhaps the person who is giving information on those forums, they didn't have that experience. So they don't know to tell you that. So I feel like, we have to take care of one another. And so, no matter what your personal situation is, I try to take care of you, and let you know what you need to think about, what how it could vary for your situation, and really, it's such a personal experience that it's hard to generalize the process other than you're going to go to VFS Global, you're going to turn in this specific document, but how'd you acquire those documents? Did you find them? Everything it could either be really easy or really hard. So yeah, I hope I provide that sense of I could be your divide and conquer.
You really were. Actually, you just took over, which I was very grateful for because even something right now as simple as it's not simple for me, trying to get all the paperwork and everything done to take my dog on the plane.
Mhm.
I just feel that I don't, I'm going to get to the airport and they're going to say, well, you haven't done this. So you can't board with the dog. So what you did for me is nurse me along every single document. So basically, would you just quickly run through some of the things that are included in that thick file that you bring to VSF Global
All right.
to apply for your visa?
Well, you need to as a general rule, um and I'm a person I'd rather be over prepared. It's important to kind of show you're going to find out that in France, you almost need three forms of proof. Um, you make a statement and then you create proof. So you have to prove who you are. You're going to need passport front page, both included, then your birth certificate, then your driver's license. So it's like, the trifecta, everything is of threes. You're going to need to have insurance that covers you during the period that you are going to establish residency before you can apply for social health care. That's also a hard topic for Americans because they feel that because it's so inexpensive that it's not full coverage. It's like another conversation where it's like, trust me, this is all you need for the moment. You do not need to pay $1,200 a month for health insurance in France. That's just doesn't exist. That's the income in France. Um, you're going to need accommodations. You have to show that you're going to live in one address for 90 days because 90 days is the period that you establish residency in France. And after the 90 days, then you have the right to apply for the healthcare system for other resources that, most Americans we don't apply for, but you actually can, um, depending on your personal situation. And so then you have money, the money part, your financials, pensions, um, 401ks, IRAs, annuities, dividends, anything. If you have your own business, then you'll have to show the documentation about your business income. So I would say that's kind of the basic. But then, depending on each person's situation, the financials might look a little different. It's like, oh, I just have Social Security or I just have a pension. That's fine. But we have to make sure that that amount seems consistent. How is it coming in? How consistently it's coming in a month? And then, like, it's not just a Social Security statement, but then they want to see it come into your bank account so they know it's not fake. So it's again, make a statement and then prove the statement.
And then your tax returns.
Yeah, I add tax returns for people so that they could see that it's a consistent amount. Because for the French, it's about consistency. That's how they know, that perhaps, you're going to be a good renter. And so they're showing the documentation, of your financials can be tricky, but at the same time, um, it's just kind of the beginning of having to do this every year to renew your visa. It's just part of the process to having to prove that you can stay in France every year.
Tell me now, I know you lived in the South, which frankly is my favorite part of France. I always thought I would live in Provence, but my French is just about non-existent, and I do need medical attention nearby with hospital staff to be able to speak some English. So, it's not like I'm sacrificing a great deal by moving to Paris, but it's because I certainly don't feel that I am, but at this particular stage in my life, which I would have wanted Aix-en-Provence as my landing base because it's sort of it's a small city, but it's still a city. But for the other reasons, I end up in Paris. And so my question to you is, with the experience you have with people who do live in France, how easy is it to meet other expats?
That can be difficult. I think people don't realize it feels like so many Americans move to France, but that percentage is quite small. It's something like 18,000 people, 18,000 Americans live in France. That's not a lot.
No.
Kinda for, a country the size of Texas. And yeah, it's difficult to find expats that not just an expat, but then someone that you kind of have chemistry with.
Sure.
So, you know, when you do find someone, sometimes you're just like at that point we mentioned, you don't have control and it's like you get to connect with someone and you frankly start making friends with people that you might have not had as friends in the United States just because you crave that connection. And
Sure.
I think it makes you a better person because you're growing. You become you have been so you're bound by the experience. And that is enough to connect you and to keep you as friends.
Got it. So I know you told me that your greatest joy is helping people realize their dream.
Yeah.
And I'm going to guess because you are it's more than helpful. I mean, really, with all the experience I've had with everyone that I've dealt with so far, you really held my hand tightly. Whereas I I feel I don't even know enough to ask the right questions.
Mm. Mhm.
And I didn't have to know that when I worked with you. So in that regard, we rarely have guest speakers on, but I am so confident to be able to not only recommend you, but highly recommend you. So I tell all of you out there that, I'm not the easiest person to please or to impress, but Madai certainly did that. And I want her to tell you a bit about her business and how you can reach out to her and get some advice. So, give us a little bit about Make a Move to France, your company.
Well, thank you for the compliments and this started really because we felt so empowered and so happy by being able to provide such a worldly culture for our kids. And so at that point, I was like, you can do it too. Come on, it doesn't take a lot. If you either, I tell people, you either have a lot of money, so you don't need a lot of grit, or you have a little money and you need a lot of grit to get this done. So it starts with a conversation. And part of the conversation is, what do you got? Grit or money? Like, how are we? Let's roll up our sleeves and how can we make this happen with the two things that are required to make this move, and not just to France, to anywhere. So it starts with a conversation. In that conversation, I like to interject and provide pertinent information. One of an example is a lot of Americans feel that, oh, it's so hard to get a rental. They just don't want to rent to immigrants. It's like, that's not the case. The case is that when you have a French contract, then let's say you get fired, or some health issue happens, you get your salary at 80%. So that means that landlord then knows that you for 2 years are going to have an income, whether you have a job or you don't, if you have a French CDI. So for them, they feel then at peace because then they know that you're a French person and then you can apply for the resources. Let's say you want, I guess the equivalent would be like Section 8 housing or some sort of resource to help you pay your housing. Well, a French person knows how to access that. An American doesn't. American doesn't even know their rights. They don't even know their squatting rights. You could squat in an apartment in France for years. It takes 3 to 4 years to get somebody out. So finances is a big deal. And so, I like to educate for the reasons. And if you have that knowledge of like, oh, that makes sense. Now, if a French person actually lived abroad or understands the American part of it, where Americans that are moving are not going to act like not pay rent. Like women will pay that rent. We'll go hungry before we don't pay that rent. That's our mentality. That's not the French mentality. The French mentality is like, I have to eat, like, I live to eat. So it's that comparison. So in the conversation, I like to educate of these are the reasons why. So that when you're empowered with that knowledge, you can then make better decisions because you have that education of how the system works, the French system. And for some, they're starting from over. They're getting rid of their American like life completely. So for me, it's really important to let people know the realities, the difficulties that you might find depending on each situation. And then, once we have that conversation, when do we do the visa? Should you get a visa? Should you be a tax resident? Should you just get a visa so that you could visit as much as you want, but be a physical resident of France, but not a tax resident because you're not going to spend 183 days? So there's just so many options that it's hard to um, really encapsulate and put in a timeline. And so I take all that information that you've learned and we put it on a timeline. This is what you do first. This is what you do second. This is how it's going to end. This is how you're going to keep renewing every year. This is what could be your goal if you do A, B, or C. Let's say if you learn French and you have been in France for 5 years, you have not left for 10 months. 6 of those 10 months no more than 6 consecutive months, then you can apply for a permanent residency. It's a 10-year card. It allows you to work, allows you to do anything you want. It allows you to go apply to Italy and say, hey, Italy, I want this permanent residency card in Italy. And so there are goals that can be obtained. For some, it's just not important because they're going to go back and forth because they miss kids, grandkids. or actually need to come back for their work or their business. So it starts with a conversation. And for some, they don't want that conversation. They just want help with the visa part because we can be very insular during this process. Like, I don't want to listen to anybody, like I don't need extra. Just help me with the visa part. I could do that too. Uh, so it really is a la carte of what you need. And yeah, it starts with having a chat first and foremost.
Great. So please give everyone the information, which, by the way, we will post it down into our description box. But how can they reach you?
Well, my website, Make a Move to France. We're also on Instagram and LinkedIn. You can send us a message there or through our website. And it would be my pleasure to help anyone. And from time to time, we also have webinars because sometimes people just want to hear the process whole. And sometimes that's a great jumping or starting point to the journey is to just see how it works out or it's going to be, and then get more personalized assistance. So yes, website, make a move to France.com.
Perfect. I can't thank you enough for visiting with us today and giving all this information. Of course, if any of you, we would love for you to comment in the box below where all of the information about Maday's company is available. And in the meantime, you know the routine. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. Nobody's going to bother you or just helps us tremendously. And you'll also see down there a join. It would be wonderful if you would join. We have certain benefits for members. And again, great help to me for you to show support. And then, of course, the usual, hit the like button. Do share us with your friends and family. And the notification bell so you know when we're doing our next drop. I appreciate your tuning in today. Stay with us for another episode in which we talk about my move to France. In the meantime, I wish you all well. Take care now. Bye.